Okay then, so a very good afternoon and warm welcome to this webinar that One Nucleus is holding in collaboration with Discovery Park. So my name is Alicia Gallier. I'm Business Development Manager at One Nucleus. And I'm really delighted to be holding this collaborative webinar today. It's a really excellent opportunity for the two respective networks to share their expertise and insights between us. And actually, we've been doing this for a few years on and off now, myself and Scarlett, who's also on the call. So it's brilliant to be leveraging the digital format as best as we can to continue this collaboration. So the topic for discussion today is the way to supercharge your early stage growth within life science. So it's going to be a panel discussion. And the focus is really going to be on the benefits of early stage programs. And the relevance here, of course, is the Discovery Park Reactor Program and the One Nucleus Virtual Innovation Centre. So we're going to be looking at how these programs enable early stage companies within our ecosystem to be successful, but looking at the long-term success and also what's needed to achieve that. So I'm delighted to have Martino Picardo as our moderator, chairman of Discovery Park. And before I hand to Martino, just a few logistical points. So we are recording. So this means that we can share the content post-webinar and also means you can catch up on the discussion if there's anything that you missed. In addition, the chat box is enabled. So we want this to be an interactive session. So you don't have to wait until the end to drop your Q&A in there. If you drop that in throughout the session, I know Martino likes to sort of have a dynamic between the panel and the audience throughout. So don't be shy and feel free to put your Q&A into the chat box. So with that, I'm going to disappear into the background, and Martino, I'm delighted to hand over to yourself to lead us into this discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia, and a big thank you to you and Scarlett for organising today, and a very big thank you to all the delegates for joining us. We've got a superstar panel with us, and Alicia set the scene superbly, so I don't need to waste any time. And so without further ado, I would ask the panel to introduce themselves, and let's start with Claire, please.
Thanks, Martino. Thanks, Alicia and Scarlett, for inviting me to be part of the panel. I'm Claire Thompson. I'm Chief Exec of Agility Life Sciences. We're an award-winning CDMO consulting and communications company. So we work with a variety of spin-outs, biotechs mostly, in three key areas, all beginning with S. I love a bit of alliteration. So the first one is in the science. We help them to turn their molecules and their ideas into products, get those products ready for the clinic. The second one is in strategy. There's no point in having a great idea if you can't get any money behind it. So we help them to convey that in a way that will help them to engage with investors and funders to put their hand in their pocket and believe in them. And the last piece, which underpins everything that we do and is very pertinent at the moment, is helping them to tell their story.
Thanks, Claire. Michael, can we come to you, please?
Thanks, Martino. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Ansley. I'm a partner at Cambridge Innovation Capital. CIC is a venture capital firm. We are based in Cambridge, and we focus on investing in IP-rich companies in and around the Cambridge ecosystem. And my particular focus is on life sciences and healthcare companies.
Thanks, Mike. David, welcome. You're on mute, David.
Apologies. Thank you, Martino, and hello, everybody. I'm David Dalton, co-founder of Oyster Venture Partners, based here in the UK. We are an investment intermediary focused specifically on life sciences and on digital health. So if we were a vehicle, we'd be a 4x4, focusing on essentially drug, diagnostics, devices, and digital health. The other dimension is that we have 4 pillars, which is effectively investment into innovation, infrastructure for investors, and also the valuation of data as a service to companies to boost their balance sheets. And finally, as an organization, we support the pathways of many trade agencies and infrastructures around Europe and the UK and the US supporting the pathways for innovators to get investment and better support as they go along. So this is a very relevant proposition for us. We're a team of 20 people, a core team of 8, with a strategic advisory board sitting at our back. And we're in the process of packaging our strategic advisory board as a service, which will be available to organizations in the future on a low-cost subscription basis. So that's Oyster Venture Partners.
Thank you, David. And Uday, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Martino. Nice to meet you all. My name's Uday Fadke. I'm based in Cambridge in the UK. I'm the CEO of a company called Cartesia, which I started over 20 years ago. And the main focus is really on commercializing science and tech-enabled innovation. So that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. More recently, I'm also the founder CEO of the Triple Chasm company. And that really stems from a very large data-driven piece of research that I've been doing in how science and tech companies actually get commercialized, which has resulted in a couple of books which I published. And I'm also the originator of the Triple Chasm approach to commercialization, which the reactor that we're going to talk about is based on.
Thanks, Uday. Now that's great. You can see that we have a stellar panel, and we should get right into it. What we're going to do is focus a little bit on the programs that are represented today, including the One Nucleus Innovation Center. But I thought it would be useful first to get a customer perspective. Mike, give us a flavor, please, on your take on accelerator, reactor, incubator programs in general, where they begin, where they end, what value they bring, and how they do actually prepare companies for investment and growth.
Martino, happy to, and also happy to be interrupted as I go through some of my thoughts. I think the starting point is CIC, and myself personally, I'm a big fan of these sorts of programs, whether they're accelerators or reactors or initiatives, a big fan. And the reason why I'm a big fan is because as an investor, we are looking for investment-ready opportunities. And whether it is right or wrong, investors tend to put their investment-ready opportunities into a box, and things need to look and feel and smell a certain way. And by having programs help companies fit into a certain box, that makes our lives easier. And so I think from a starting point, having an easy sell for an investment makes things much smoother for all parties. The other aspect is, without this sounding negative, often it takes some time for caterpillars to turn into butterflies, and that process should hopefully happen as quickly as possible. And it's not fair to rely on your own expertise to be able to go through that. So by having experts who can help you go from caterpillar to butterfly as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, as effectively as possible, that's a real benefit. And that will help you become investor ready and increase your chances of hooking a VC or an angel or a family office to be able to put money into your company and then continue your growth pattern. Sadly, I see all sorts of different programs, initiatives, accelerators, and not all are great in my view. And there's great ones and there's less great ones. And if I had to be making generalizations of what makes these programs great, there's a couple of them. So first of all, I think these programs need to be quite focused and quite specialist in the support they give. And so whether that focus is around a specific sector, so if you're a therapeutics focused, I would argue that therapeutics companies often have quite different challenges than a diagnostic company. And I know there'll be a discussion saying there's common thread and common problems, but my view is that sector specialization is often very valuable. Another important point is having continuity, and an area I find quite dangerous is what I call drop-in, drop-out mentoring. And sometimes these mentors in these programs that follow the drop-in, drop-out mentoring can actually be more destructive than constructive. And what's quite dangerous, I get asked for coffee chats all the time. Mike, can you give me an hour of your time to give me some advice on their company. And I'm always happy to do that with a massive disclaimer, which is 1 hour of learning about your company is not enough for me to give any meaningful advice. And sometimes it's wrong because I don't know the whole context, right? So avoiding the drop in, drop out and going with programs that allow sort of a longitudinal view of your company and to really understand the company. So I think that's the second point. And then the third point is I'm going to maybe plant a seed for my friend Uday here, which is often companies don't take a look in the mirror and understand exactly what their issues are. And I think we're all guilty of this. You know, I think something's wrong, but actually the true problem is totally different. And so initiatives that take a step back and do a honest diagnosis of where your strengths are, where your gaps are, suggestions on how to build on your strengths, and as appropriate, fill the gaps, I think are really important, right? What's dangerous is a one size fits all, this is my template, and follow that, because every company is different, every company has different problems, and often founders don't really know what their challenges are, right? So I think that's important, some honesty there.
Brilliant segue from sector specific to mentor drop in, drop out, and navigation is what you're talking about from starting to end. And we'll pick up on some of those. And we're going to pick up on one of those right now with our view from the mentors. Claire, pick up from your perspective on programs and your role specifically as a quality mentor.
Oh, thank you. Quality, goodness me. Need to put that on the LinkedIn profile. Yeah, I've been scribbling away as Mike has been talking. I think this whole piece around fitness to fly, rather than, you know, not just turning from a caterpillar into a butterfly. It's which butterfly are you going to be? And I think the value of some of these programs is having that mirror piece and having that distillation down into, you know, you have 4 or 5 different ideas. Your product or your company could be, you know, it could be product driven, it could be service driven, who you're selling your products to, what markets you're going into. You know, we're all excited about the things that we're involved with, and I think that reflects on any of these accelerator programs. I've been involved in a few, but in particular on the discovery part piece, I certainly find that the groups that I was involved with started off with ideas of, well, we could do this and we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. It's narrowing that down into, okay, which is the first butterfly and how do you ensure that that is fit to fly? And I think that's one of the real distinctive things that certainly come out of this program.
Claire, can I just ask you on that?
Please, yes.
How many of the companies that you've been directly involved in focused on in that investor ready bit and less on the scale up and growth? Or do you see the two as inextricably connected?
I think you've all at this stage you've always got to be looking at being investor ready. You know, biotech companies, whether they're startups or they're SMEs, are always thinking around when's the next investment stage. So I think it's a blurred line. But the piece around what's the nugget, what's the first investable piece, has got to have that very, very clear proposition. And the feedback that I've had from the groups that I've been mentoring is that the program itself, in its structure and the fact that it was very almost academic driven, really made those steps quite clear as to how to dig into these pieces and have that mirror held up and very frequently through the program. So I feel that it's certainly been beneficial.
A real theme of looking through that and from start and during the journey and beyond. Perfect.
Indeed. So and just on the piece, some of the pieces that are missing, and I just want to pick up on one of the things that Mike said around what are the things that we're not seeing. What I'm seeing time and time again, which is missed out from each of these programs of the companies that are involved in them, is the risks. So I'm a big fan of acknowledging risks, embracing risks, and being active about how you're going to mitigate them. We can never get rid of these things, but be very open about them, because if you say, oh, we haven't got technical risks or our commercial risks are low, really, are you really being honest with yourself about this? So yeah, don't be risk averse, be risk active.
Proactive management of risk. Thank you for that. So, David and Uday, now's a chance to talk specifically in the context of what Mike and Claire have been saying about your programs and your activity. So, David first, then Uday, and then I'll just say a little bit about the One Nucleus Innovation Centre. And if we can cover that in the next 5-10 minutes, that would be superb. David.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martino. And also thank you, Claire and Michael. You both used two phrases which fit perfectly into what it is that Oyster Venture Partners does. I love the fit to fly phraseology, but of course, our entire business is centered around investor readiness. Let me begin by saying that the Corporate Finance Institute in the US did a survey of, in the life sciences space, of 3,000 separate propositions that were generated by innovators, by their promoters, and sent direct to investors seeking investment. The output was extraordinary. Only 200 of the propositions were looked at seriously, and of the 200, 20 were invested. Now, 20 out of 3,000 is 0.7%. Now, forgetting about any success further downstream post-investment, that creates a massive issue for scientists coming out of their laboratories with their lab coats on. They've generated extraordinary IP, which could have exceptional value. But unless their proposition gets the core argument across and its appropriate market positioning across in the first 2 or 3 pages of a pitch deck that is sent to an investor, it simply is going to be bypassed. And from an investor perspective, and for this, we have gone literally around the world this year, surveying investors about their own internal processes, just by virtue of the fact that they are receiving extraordinary levels of deal flow. Now, at 0.7%, which is the hit rate for an unsupported proposition going direct to an investor, the investor, of course, is sifting and sorting 1,000 propositions for every 5 or 6 investments that they happen to be making. Now, aside from the resource implication that involves, what it effectively means is that some fantastic sciences could be simply overlooked. So we support the investors by taking them through our platform process, which was supported by Innovate UK. The grant awarded Oyster last year. We've completed a platform which enables every proposition to be scored for every aspect of its investor readiness, the very term that Michael has used. And at the back of it, there is a scoring system. And this, of course, then sets the agenda by which Oyster and the innovator will get together to strengthen and build up the investment proposition, so that when it does be presented to the market, it has all of the key components that will be sought by the investor. But the other implication is, by this pre-due diligencing of propositions, when it comes to the investor's own due diligence processes around the time they are meeting their investment committees to present an investment proposition, it also means that the elasticity in timescale is very often reduced if the plan is better prepared. So from that point of view, we do everything we possibly can to fill all of the gaps to make sure that when the proposition is provided to investors, it is complete and ready to go, and will be one of those that will be looked at seriously, and hopefully one of those that are invested. And finally, in order to do that, we have a huge deal flow, given that we work with all the trade agencies, the hubs, the accelerators, and so on around Europe and beyond. And the question is, if we end up with 6 molecular diagnostic propositions on our desk, 3 of them are based on CTCs, 3 of them are based on exosomes or whatever. The question is, which of these are the most likely, and why ought they be technology propositions? So we have 3 mantras: great teams, great technologies, and great market traction makes a great proposition. So we're in the business of converting the sciences and the technologies into great investment stories, but we're looking at the caliber of the team, the quality of the technology, and also the market fit, and also how much has that team done with that technology with very little funds to gain traction, their KOL base, their market adoption drivers, and so on, well established before the proposition is put forward. So that effectively is what Oyster is doing. It's a complete managed runway that enables investors to take innovators to take their propositions from effectively a science-based or technology-based deck through to one that is far more digestible by the very investors that they are seeking investment from.
Thank you, David. And that, validation from Innovate UK funding for a new platform is great. Thank you. So, Uday, tell us about the Reactor program.
So it's very interesting listening to David's statistic of about 0.75% success rate. I mean, over that, about the last 10 years of research of data, we've been looking at the actual percentage of companies that successfully raise venture capital finances anywhere between 2 to 3% globally. And that includes the US West Coast and other places. So that's a nice sobering statistic. But that leads me on to how the reactor works. The reactor is based on the triple chasm model, and there are 3 key building blocks for that model. The first is the whole idea of commercialization maturity, right? So it's where are you on this journey? And so we are trying to measure CRL, commercialization readiness level, and that may or may not translate into investor readiness, depending on whether you're going to have customers drive your growth or whether you're going to rely on funding. So the commercialization readiness level is very critical. And we use that as Claire was saying, we monitor the CRL levels and people come in, we ongoing monitor them, and we monitor them as they leave, and we provide them with tools so they can carry on monitoring themselves as they're doing that. So the first key thing is, where are you on this journey? And that's different, I should hasten to add, from things like TRL, which are typically present a much more optimistic view of progress for most technology companies. So that's building block 1. The second one is, so what am I going to do about it? And that's where the whole body of work we did on identifying mesoeconomic vectors. So these are the drivers, and there are 4 external drivers and 6 internal drivers. And so we're really trying to bring together the whole idea of what the market space is doing and link it to what the innovation is doing, what the IP is doing. So that's the second thing, is a way of being able to characterize these teams or companies in quite a precise way, based on a lot of data and a lot of insight models. And then when you knit this commercialization readiness together with the mesoeconomic vector model, you're able to effectively profile the journey of the company. And because we've got data from thousands of companies historically, we can actually compare and say, at this point in the journey, the people who succeeded had this kind of profile compared to where you are. And so that's been the building blocks for the reactor. There's probably one other thing worth saying, which is very relevant in the light of what Michael has said, is that we've begun to see very clearly that the translational complexity in life sciences is something that most of the people who came on the reactor are struggling with. And that's different from the generalized translational complexity. So that translational complexity means that they need to think much harder and much more clearly in terms of the things that Claire was about focus. Where's your focus going to be? And I think there are 3 things that we are seeing now, which people like me saw 15, 20 years ago in the digital media space. One of those things that's happening is really the huge growth in what I call biological fragments coming out of the R&D lab. All the stuff to do with RNA and single molecules, different assemblages of protein. That complexity is now throwing up a whole load of stuff. That's one. The second is the data and digital dimension, which is that because of the huge proliferation in the actual primary data, and also the omics revolution, we're now dealing with lots and lots of data, and also there are translational challenges. So if you're doing gene therapy, for example, how do you translate biomarkers into clinical insights, for example, and what do regulators say about that? And as a result of the first and the second, we're seeing some fundamental restructuring of value chains, the way in which value is created, and it's restructuring complete markets, which is, of course, both an opportunity for investors and a challenge for investors in terms of deciding where they focus their energy. So the interesting thing for us has been, we've had to run this reactor we've run, the cohort 1, is at what we call a heterogeneous, where we have people at different levels of maturity on the same program, which is actually true for most accelerators, although they wouldn't say that explicitly. There's quite a bit of spread. And it's been quite interesting to see the peer-to-peer learning between these companies and these groups. So maybe at that point, Martin, I should just stop for a moment, because as you know, I could go on forever on this subject. So
yeah, I was just about to call time, but thank you, David and David. That gives me time to talk about the One Nucleus Innovation Centre. while I talk about the Innovation Centre, I'm going to give you a chance to think, because we've had an anonymous question that goes along the lines of, which is the best accelerator UK and abroad? So I want to give you all a chance to think. You're not allowed to name your own programs, of course, but it'd be good to, we were going to talk about benchmarking UK-wide and internationally next anyway. So let's give you a chance to think, and I'll talk briefly about the Innovation Centre that One Nucleus have recently established. So there's a lot more information on the website, the One Nucleus website, and Aileen is on the call today as well, if you want to direct any questions to her. But the goal of One Nucleus is to enable their members to maximise their performance. And we formalise this into a structured programme, the Virtual Innovation Centre. This is an exclusive programme to help life science companies as they develop and become increasingly operational in areas including winning larger investment rounds, building partnerships, internationalization, establishing laboratory facilities, building teams, outsourcing or accessing business support. They are leveraging the expertise of their sponsors, partners, and members to deliver the support via workshops and bespoke one-on-one sessions. One Nucleus would, of course, be happy to provide further information post-session for those that would like to hear more. So that's just in terms of a new initiative around a virtual innovation centre that is forming part of the UK landscape. So I'm going to come back to you now. Claire, from the hip, well, just give me a benchmark, one that you think, a program that you think is a good one.
I'll give you a couple. So UK-based, the ones that either have been established before and have kind of grown into something else, or ones that have been going for a few years. So the Abraham program is very good. It does seem to be Cambridge focused, so it's not really attracting others into the area. Rebel Bio also had a very, very good reputation. It was based around Imperial. The We Are Pioneer Group, the former BioCity one. Again, these are all, you know, they should be diverse in the companies that they attract, but they are quite regional. And I would say that the Y Combinator one in San Francisco is a phenomenal one as well. And they all share the same pieces in that they have investors or investment groups that are directly related to them or associated with them. Okay. So they build that fitness to fly. They build the teams, the technologies, the traction, the confidence in that, to coin David's term there. But they have the investors ready at the end so that they can assess them and then invest Claire. As appropriate.
Thank you. David, any to add to that?
Absolutely. Well, one I think, as you would know well, Martina, of course, would be Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst. I mean, clearly there is an immense incubating capability there. It's grown from strength to strength. There's a strong accelerator program. And of course, one of the features of that was the open innovation environment, which was built, which enabled a lot of cross collaboration. But we work obviously across the board, and particularly the inventors we work with very often want to go to the US. So there are many in the US that are equally excellent in their support. You know, for example, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, for example, right in the middle of the research triangle, they pull together all of the subcomponents into one ecosystem, which helps companies develop. But I would say that going to a Bio International conference and you see hundreds and hundreds of such accelerators and incubators advertising their wares and various states and so on, the key issue here is that one which is appropriate for the particular domain of the technology or the science that is being offered will offer pathways into not just the marketplace, but other centers of expertise which are highly relevant. And indeed, the original SBC open innovation environment will further stimulate derivatives of whatever it is that is being developed.
Yeah. Thanks, David. God bless you for mentioning open innovation. Uday, any to add to this already long list?
To be honest, we've actually been using our tools in order to assess the relative effectiveness of different interventions, different accelerators, different incubators. So we have a lot of data, very granular data, which compares the value add from, and it would be unfair of me to kind of, because we may or may not publish that data eventually.
All right.
But the one I would say that people should try and emulate is Y Combinator, just like that. I think Y Combinator have established a very good track record and a model for what they do.
Yeah. Mike, is Y Combinator the gold standard?
If I take one side step before I answer that question, Martino, the companies that we see that are post, if I use the word accelerator, the ones that are the most investment ready have three consistent components to them. One is a seed fund associated with that program. So the ability to have some money go into the companies to provide some proof of concept work or some activities. Two is physical space. Even in this virtual world, I'm a big believer of physical space, which allows in-person interventions using Uday's word, often in the biotech space with the lab facilities as well, which removes some of the CapEx requirements of these companies. And then the third is people who have truly done it before, right? So if you have some cash associated with it, physical space, and people who've done it before, those programs tend to create the best companies. And to answer your question, Y Combinator was the first to do that, and there's lots of great models that are based around that. The local one in the UK, I think the only one in the UK doing that is Start Codon, which is a version 2.0, I would say, of that, focused on life sciences and healthcare.
Thank you, Mike. Uday, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question that's come from Aileen. She didn't want to stay anonymized, but it goes along the lines of, what makes these early stage support programs successful beyond alumni fundraising, and how can that help companies choosing which one is right for them? How do you choose, Uday?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I think the one thing not to do is to go after what I call the Frank Sinatra School of Entrepreneurship-led things, where I did it my way, where you have a bunch of entrepreneurs who are ex-entrepreneurs who are associated with these accelerators who try and force you down a particular route that they've been on. But more positively, the thing is, I think when you're looking at them, I would look at three things. One is I would look at the mentors that are associated with it, because that kind of expertise is really what makes a very big difference. The second, I think, is the methodology for value add. In other words, do they have any kind of structured approach, or do they just say, if it's Friday, it must be the time for the IP lawyer to come and chat? So methodology and some real structured focus is the second one. And the third, I think Mike's already referred to, which is that understanding how you need to kind of gradually piggyback and get your funding and support in. Because if you just turn up and expect you to go from scratch straight into a VC pitching session, then you're going to be disappointed. So you need to be able to kind of gradually work up to getting angels involved or getting some startup funds, accelerators, others involved.
So Claire first and then David, have the guys missed anything from your perspective on successful programs?
I think from my point of view, it would be very much around emulating for the investment pathway, the support structures that are already in place for such as the Runway program, the Reactor program, and so on. These are all pieces of critical infrastructure that innovators need coming out of their laboratories in order to get to successful product in market on a cheaper, faster, better for the healthcare basis. In the case of Discovery Park and for the Virtual Innovation Center, the support structures are absolutely outstanding. But I think from an investment perspective, it's not as joined up, certainly at the investor preparation stage. And this is why there are so many failures. So we'd like to see far more adoption of specialized intermediaries for companies that are planning on investment. Otherwise, they can go down a rat hole and in 6 months' time not get funded and then scratch their head and actually wonder why that was the case. And very often it is not to do with the science, that they were not invested, but it was to do for some reason beyond their own understanding. They don't know what they don't know. They're in a domain, they're scientists, they're technologists, they don't necessarily know about commercialization or indeed about investment. So a support structure to sustain that pathway, I think would be a great development.
Yeah. So Claire, let me frame the question slightly differently to you. You know, in terms of KPIs, the guys are all focused on, you know, how many get to investment and perhaps reducing the failure rate. But we're talking about people here.
We're always talking about people, and I was wanting to reflect on Uday's comment that people make or break any organization, any infrastructure. So it's absolutely critical to get the right people in place within the organizations and within that support structure. I mean, my concern about all of these programs is that we're focusing on the pre-incubation, pre-acceleration stages, and then onto that incubation stage where it's it's seed funding, it's Series A funding. But if we look at the state of the UK at the moment, I'm going to go all UK PLC. We want to keep businesses here. Life sciences is one of the very few industries that is going to get the UK back out of the doldrums that it is in, and therefore we have to help organizations to scale here. So we have to give them an environment in which they can succeed from a small scale, but then enable them to scale that up and have the infrastructure. So it's about it's always that triangle of investment, infrastructure, and talent. And I don't think that we have the right programs in place. And we, our Pioneer Group, have started are about to start their scale up program, which I'm hoping is going to be very successful. But I would love to see more of those, so that we're not just filling the pipeline at the earlier stages with Start Code On, with the Discovery Park program, with Abraham, etc. But we're able to flow that and create an environment in which UK life science can succeed.
Yeah, we need to change the shape of the funnel so that more companies get through the funnel for the right reasons.
Indeed. And I also have a question for the rest of the panelists around, do we need more of these accelerator and incubator programs, or do we need to concentrate and associate more investors with the existing ones?
All right, let's start.
I'm happy for you to pose that back.
Yeah, now, did everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
Mike, fire away, Mike.
If we cover all the problems and challenges that companies face, you want to have specialist interventions for each of those different things. And right now, I think to Claire's point, there is not all the support you need across the lifetime of a company. So I'm certainly up for more in the UK, but not at the front end, but I think along the journey as companies grow and mature.
Okay, David, do you want to comment on that? Because
certainly shall, absolutely. Exactly. So innovators coming through the process, indeed through the Reactor Program or the VIC, are picking up advisors and specialists within your own existing infrastructures. And as they go through the various stages, those are that talent, but that more importantly, that understanding about how a proposition evolved is being left behind with the people that are being left behind. So I think what I would like to see would be the advisors stay with the journey, with the entrepreneur much later down the track, and that's why we are looking at the SAB process, which was in our case, it does the initial assessment as to which propositions we take on. They then act as consultants where needed for the various parts of the journey, but also they are there to engage for the mobilization stage post-investment, so that there's a complete deep understanding building up around the CEO of a body of support that will take them further forward down the track.
So Uday, directly to you now, my friend. Less at the start and more at the later stages, right?
Yeah, no. So I mean, my views on this, Martino. I mean, all our work actually showed us that the reason the company is called the Triple Chasm Company is there are three chasms. The first chasm is concept to prototype, which is where most of these accelerator programs are focused. The second chasm is actually the hardest one, where you're trying to get charter customers, demonstrate commercial viability. And chasm 3 is where you're trying to grow in channels and kind of go into international markets. And the success rates are very instructive. About 90% of companies make it across chasm 1 with or without accelerators. About 9.5% make it across chasm 2. And so when the scale-up sort of initiative was launched by Osborne and others, I was thrilled because I thought at last there's a recognition of what needs to be done. Sadly, the reality is these programs are just being extended accelerator programs. And so we actually run dedicated scale-up programs, for example, in healthcare at the moment, which are focused around Chasm 2, where everything matters. And so that's really, I think that's where the gap is. And I agree, Martina, that's what we need to
can see a hand up, Uday. So.
Yeah, I know. Michael's
on, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to share caution on the stat that Uday just said about 90% get across Chasm 1. A successful program will set you up to get across Chasm 2 and Chasm 3. And that doesn't mean that you don't need additional support along that way. But one of the challenges we see is you can probably, as an early stage company, go and raise a seed round, right? Whether it's the right seed round, whether it's setting you up for success in the future, whether it's thinking ahead. So that's where I see the value of the early stage programs, not just for that immediate need, but for the longer term need as well. And I think that's another good component of a good program that's setting you up down the road. And so Uday, I think you weren't suggesting this, but foundations at the beginning are important to get you to success.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with you. But the mesoeconomic vector data says that in the early stages, less things matter than around later on. So I'm with you on that, which is why on the reactor that Discovery Park been running, we've actually had companies at various points in that journey, precisely for that reason. But yeah, you're right. If you set off for a very short-term Chasm 1 crossing to get over the first hurdle to get to a prototype, but you haven't thought about stuff. I mean, we've got some very interesting data which shows that companies that think earlier on about where they're heading next are more likely to be successful, which is exactly the point you're making. And I've got a lovely slide one day I'll share with you, Michael, which actually shows this really graphically to say, if you think about these other things earlier, then you're going to be more successful later.
Okay, so I just want to go back to the chat box here from Dave Graham here, reflecting on Claire's comments. Isn't that what Synchrony are doing with their portfolio of companies, e.g. Orderless building a manufacturing site in Stevenage Town Centre? I think he's right, isn't he, Claire?
He is right. Yeah, he's absolutely right. But that's Synchrony as an investment vehicle rather than having it as a part of a scale-up program, which has got a number of different types of organizations in it. You know, Synchrony are heavily backing cell and gene therapy. They've made that one of their key streams. But yes, he is right, and it's great. It's great Claire, to see more of that in and around the Stevenage area. Well,
I'm going to come to David next on that point. But while Synchrony build towards scale up, they build the team as well. They bring talent pool up to the standard and the level and quality that's required. Isn't that the way it should be, David?
Well, from an innovator's point of view, from a scientist, whatever, I mean, obviously they lack all of the key components, and it is such a complex process, especially within the life sciences space. I think from my point of view, the infrastructure that is essential for a proposition to become successful in the market, such as the ones that are being discussed and described today, in conjunction with the smart money, which can be available from the right investors, it seems to me that the infrastructure piece needs itself almost a body or an association or a conference of its own to discuss how it can collaborate in all the various centres of expertise, for example, around the UK or indeed in the east of England, with the two organisations we have today. So I personally would like to see the infrastructure piece, the support piece, which is underpinning the journey for the successful entrepreneurs, to have its own coordination and not just operate in separate bodies such as infrastructure, such as people, and such as investment. I would like to see, obviously, more of what we're doing today come together in some associated form.
I'm going to come to Uday now, and specifically, you know, we have Discovery Park Ventures as the proof of concept seed fund, and you and I have been talking directly about how we make better connections from our Reactor program into that fund. Do you like the Orderless model? Is it a good model to follow?
Well, it's a model. It's a model. And there are lots of different ways of doing it. There are lots of different models. So I wouldn't want to necessarily say, I think it works quite well from what I've seen, the limited amount I've seen about Orderless. But there are, you know, I mean, it's one of the things here is that there has to be a diversity of view. And, you know, to speak to, if we want to scale, we've got to scale nationally. In fact, you can use the UK PLC argument. Because it's not just sufficient to have Synchrony doing something good in one little space. We need to kind of be able to do this across the piece. And, you know, we also need to understand what we mean by scale up, because if you're talking about manufacturing and all the stuff you're trying to do at Discovery Park, you know, something very fundamental is going on in terms of the whole manufacturing, distribution and deployment models. So for example, say about cell and gene therapies, you know, this kind of attempt to retrofit manufacturing around the old model for clinical translation isn't going to work, I don't think.
No, but
so
Uday,
yeah.
Uday, I think the point I was hoping to make is right to Mike's original point about fit for purpose and specific sector specific. That was what was needed in cell and gene therapy at that time because of the lack of funding, the lack of people, the lack of skills, the lack of infrastructure. And maybe that's a model for, who knows, it might be a digital model because the current models don't work. Is that, am I being too generic here?
No, I think focused interventions are good because the market spaces are very different in that characterization with very different timescales and different levels of funding required. So, you know, if you're trying to do RNA-seq-based stuff, if you're trying to deliver new antibodies, you're trying to see the difference between delivery platforms and different payloads that you're going to deliver. That's a very deep investment opportunity compared to, say, taking a new medical device, which is improving, you know, so say point-of-care diagnostics just for, say, glucose levels. So I think I'm saying yes, but I think you need to think about what that focus is going to be and understand the space in which you're playing.
Okay, let's move the conversation on. You know, one of the other points we all made when we pre-chat was about the regionality of some of these programs. And I just want to get your thoughts and thinking on, is regionality good? Is it important? Should we be doing more to nationalize or connect some of these programs the way that, for example, we, our Pioneer Group, are now coming out of Bath City and Alderley and expanding across. Claire, you're nodding your head. So what do you think?
I am, yeah. I think that, you know, regionality is great in terms of nucleation and growth, and we'll see those ever increasing circles out of there. So I actually disagree with Uday on the Stevenage Hertfordshire piece around that become a national piece. I think the way that it has grown there and exploded actually over the last few years to become Europe's biggest hub for cell and gene therapy and the second biggest in the world is a phenomenal success for the region and for the UK. And the fact that we're seeing that ripple effect outside of there, and even perhaps something that might end up down at Discovery Park, I don't know, but connectivity is absolutely key. We are still quite fragmented. I mean, medtech is the worst in terms of being fragmented all over the UK. We've got, you know, the Leeds area, we've got London, we've got south of London, we've got bits in the Norfolk, all the way across to Cambridge.
Claire,
yes,
you've made such a good point there, specifically around medtech. I know David is from a medtech background originally, and, you know, the Irish model seems to have worked. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, the Irish model is in the medtech space, of course, is very highly developed, and the support infrastructures have support capabilities for every single decision point and inflection point within the journey of any entrepreneur. But this goes back to the point I was making earlier. There may be in the southeast of England a particularly strong emphasis on one particular subdomain or cell and gene therapy, for example. But the point is there are smaller pockets around the rest of the country that perhaps don't get much visibility because they're not in the epicenter of where it's perceived to be. So this is what I'm saying, is that if the infrastructure components around the UK could be coordinated through some associative network or some mapping was done, we'd be in a position where for every specific type of technology and every particular science that the map for that science will be well known right across the UK. And of course, with virtual communication as we have right now, it doesn't matter where people are sitting. The question is to get the right support in place. So I would, and
David, I think you're describing utopia, and it's something that we'd all want. I want to come to Mike. Mike, utopia versus regionality versus leveling up. What's your take on all of this?
Heavy duty questions. My view is the UK is a geographically small place. I'm from Canada, and so it's a different scale entirely. And the benefit of having a relatively small space geographically is that you can set up centers of excellence across the country. And that's the way I think that we'll have the greatest successes, where if you can have a center of excellence in topic A in one part and a center of excellence in topic B in another part, I think that's where you have the best success. And then of course you get into the exciting interdisciplinary aspects, but England and the UK is a small place, so you can bounce around those quite easily. I get very nervous when we try to be involved in every aspect in all parts of the country. I think that is a challenge and leads
horses for courses, Mike. Thank you for that. Uday, I want you to just move the conversation along. Dave Graham's just come up with a sort of question comment. Didn't Matt Hancock say we were going to have a world-class med tech diagnostics industry? How close to that are we, Uday?
Simple answer is I don't know. That's maybe but one of the things worth pointing out is that it relates to the things people have been saying about the need for regional clusters and stuff like that. And can we build critical mass in certain areas? The first question I ask is, what's the balance between public sector investment and private sector activity? And that's important to understand, because that balance is one of the critical things which is going to drive that. And the second thing, coming back directly to your question about, Matt Hancock's claims, if we took face value all the claims made by different ministers who've been in the job for very short periods of time, I don't think that's any way to drive an industrial strategy. So rather than worry about the claim about how we're going to be world class, I would just say it's great that the minister actually knew about this particular industry and talked about it. But actually, I think it's down to us to do something about it. Michael has got his hand up again, I see. Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Before Mike comes in, I'm just going to put you all on notice that we're coming towards the end, and I'm going to ask you each to wrap up with a final comment, a statement around what you think the KPIs for success for these programs are, just to bring the conversation back to where we started. One KPI metric for success that we can measure. Mike, fire away with your response to Uday, I think.
Am I allowed to respond to Uday? Do you want me to answer the question you just asked directly?
No, Uday's respond to Uday first so we can give everybody notice, and then I'll come back to you at the end.
I think I'm agreeing with what Uday was saying, which is I love Matt Hancock's statement, because even if it's not true, the statement itself is fantastic and ambition building and quite non-English, if I will. And so that's great. Say something bold, and then we as a collective, we will make it happen. So very fond of that.
All right, thank you for that. I just would put the note of caution to both of you. We made a similar statement about clinical trials in the UK, but that's just a personal view. Right, start the wrap up for us. One KPI, please.
Thank you, Martino. Yes, from our point of view, investor readiness is essentially important. I think with the programs that are being operated right now, the Reactor Program and VIC and so on, getting companies more surely invested sooner just brings the whole process forward, because it's otherwise a distraction for the innovators and the leaders of the business. I think the number of propositions that are invested as a hit rate is woefully low. I think that if we could increase that hit rate, we will be doing something quite good for the industry and the innovation space as a whole.
Claire.
I've kind of smirked about all of the Matt Hancock comments. I think the Conservative government have claimed a lot of things that would be world beating and they're yet to be right about anything. But I like Mike's kind of comments about, if we build it, they will come. It seems to be kind of a flag to us that if this is a challenge and we certainly can do it. And as I said earlier, I think that we absolutely should continue to build this ecosystem for life sciences. But I think I've got three things that will help to provide successful programs. The first one is people. So the right people that are involved in teams, the right people that have been there before and have the war wounds and the lines around their eyes, to provide that mentoring piece. Places, so physical places. I think a number of us on the panel have talked about not just these programs that are virtual, but to have places on the ground where people can actually set up their organizations and can grow on. So that grow on space is a massive issue for the UK at the moment, no matter who is running these programs. And the third is people again. So we've got to wrap this around with the skill set of people who can help to grow these programs on. So it's the start, the places to put people, and the people to continue to grow.
Thank you. Uday.
I think we should really be focusing on commercial impact. I think that's the thing at any stage. And what I mean by that is we need to help people to have the ambition. I think Claire said earlier about people selling out too early or getting out, and all these programs. What I'd love to see is all these people who come on the programs, we've raised their level of ambition to create real commercial impact. So not worry about how much money they've raised or how big their team has got, but what commercial impact have they had in the space that they're operating in. That would be my one metric. If we could look and say all the people on the reactive created commercial impact, I'd be very happy, irrespective of how much money they raised.
Just to push back on that, commercial impact, not patient benefit.
I think it's commercial impact. I think, patient benefit is part of that.
All right.
Patient benefit creates commercial impact.
Thank you for that. Mike, very quickly, one KPI from the investor.
Agree with everything David, Claire, and Uday has said. One other perspective to look at is shareholder value creation. Of course, I'm going to say that as the investor, but part of this is not just raising funds, but actually building value, creating value for shareholders. That includes founders, of course, and I think that's an important component.
Thank you. And thank you to you all. That was amazing. I really enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed it as panelists and delegates as much as I did. I think we had some disagreement, we had some disruption, but there's some level clarity around the importance of these programs. I think from a personal perspective, I think the Reactor and the Oyster Ventures and the Virtual Innovation Centre will all play important roles moving forwards, and we all look forward to hearing from you in the future. And thank you so much again to Scarlett and Alicia for organising such a really interesting event, and thank you all for attending.
And just on behalf of Nucleus, thank you very much, Martino, David, Claire, Uday, and Michael, and to all the attendees online. That was really lively. I really enjoyed that. Some real key learnings and diversity of opinions as well, which is always important. And the reason why we have the breadth of network and expertise that we do. So really enjoyed that. Just to all delegates, keep a lookout for the event follow-up, which will have a link to the recording. So it means you can catch up on the debate if you'd like to revisit. And actually, please feel free to share. If you think someone who'd benefit from also listening to the learnings, then please feel free to share that with them also. So we're right on time, so bang on 3. So with that, I'm now going to close the session and wish everyone a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. Well, take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.